So I am Kim Johnson. I'm an employer outreach coordinator for Wake County. And again, thank you for joining us today. It's our seventh edition of Mission Impossible. And we will be talking about exploring policy development for a hybrid workplace. And first, I would like to give a special thank you to our regional partners and the chamber and business membership organizations that have helped to spread the word about this event. Your assistance has helped to make the group that participates in these events very diverse and make it a real representation of the business community in the Triangle. So thank you. So now I would like to introduce Shelley Parker. Shelley coordinates our regional program as the Sustainable Travel Services Manager at GoTriangle. She will share a brief overview of our program. And here we go, Shelley.
So our work as transportation demand management professionals is quite simple. We reduce the number of single occupancy drivers on the roads in the Triangle. We provide grant funded and free consulting services to property managers, learning institutions, and employers, both public and private. And our goal is to establish commuter programming, promote sustainable travel options, and work options that reduce travel miles across the region. We educate commuters about carpooling, van pooling, biking, walking, transit, and telework. And we help employers with resources like those we're sharing today to help them in strengthening their organizations and employees. And we support alternatives to driving alone through supportive services like ride matching for carpools, incentive programs, individualized commuter assistance, and emergency ride home. We help sustain companies with essential workers, enabling them to safely get where they need to go, and provide assistance to organizations with new or established telework programs in creating and strengthening hybrid work. So no matter where your company or industry stands, if you're trying to determine what to do next for increasing or maintaining an effective workforce, our transportation management partners are here to help. I encourage you to visit GoTriangle.org's employer services page, which is in the chat, or just click that box right there. An employer services consultant like Kim or other areas will coordinate schedules for free ongoing services in employee commute options. Whether those commutes are traveling down a roadway or, for Throwback Thursday terminology, the information superhighway, AKA the internet for teleworking. So thanks, Kim, and I will hand it back over to you.
All right, so thank you, Shelley. And just to be clear, before we continue, I have one formal announcement to make. I would like to share that the information provided during this webinar does not and is not intended to constitute legal advice. Instead, all of the information, content, materials available are for general informational purposes. The information shared during this webinar may not constitute the most up-to-date legal or other information since it's changing daily in response to the new normal. During this webinar, we will share links and to other third-party websites. Such links are only for the convenience of participants. GoTriangle and its member agencies do not maintain, recommend, or endorse the contents of third-party sites. And now back to exactly why we're here. Our featured speaker will be sharing GoTriangle's experience and approach. It's not a checklist, so please note that our situation is constantly evolving. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to today's featured speaker, our very own Chief of Staff, Sharon Chavis. Sharon is a self-proclaimed problem solver. She served 15 years with the NCDOT, managing an array of programs, including Title VI, Disadvantaged Business Enterprise, and more. She was also Chief of Staff and Vice President of Administration at St. Augustine's University. She is also the project leader for developing GoTriangle's return to the workplace, and she'll be providing highlights of her experience of her agency with more than 200 employees. As transportation operators, some have been required to be at work in person daily. Others have been teleworking full-time since March 2020. Sharon?
Thank you, Kim, for that kind introduction. And it's my pleasure to be speaking to the Mission Impossible group today. So let's get started. Many of you may hear or have heard the words return to work plan. After hearing an employee tell me that she didn't like return to work because it really didn't sound like we had been working when we say return to work. So she suggested that we use return to office. So we're using return to office, and that's what you'll be hearing throughout my presentation today. Returning to the office is something our leadership team is carefully evaluating and deciding, and decisions are layered with complexity and should not be taken lightly. We spent a lot of time researching and participating in webinars to obtain best practices and suggestions for returning our employees to the office, and we'll be sharing with you what we've learned and steps we are taking at GoTriangle. So, our leadership. To prepare for returning our employees in a manner that they feel comfortable performing their jobs safely, our approach at GoTriangle began with a leadership discussion to clarify several questions, such as, is the office actually ready to be re-inhabited? And was it deep clean? Can we reassure our employees that they will be safe entering the workplace? And what will we do if employees come back to the office and get sick? That's just a few of the questions that we've been asking ourselves on our leadership team. So to address some of the ways that we are actually approaching our return to office, our executive leadership team is currently working to identify employees to serve on a return to office response team. We want to ensure that every part of our agency is represented, and the team will not just consist of all leadership and management. Our response team will be a diverse group who's empowered to do the work necessary to develop a plan and policy. We've identified an executive sponsor to establish and lead the initiative. And guess what? That would be me. So I'll be leading this initiative and working with our leadership team, working with the response team. Our work groups. The response team will be, working on work groups. And so we're treating this like any other strategic planning effort that we may have. And we want to make sure that we get the right people in the right seat on our bus. Therefore, our response team will be working on work groups such as social distancing to manage social distancing in regards to arriving and departing employees, as well as our visitors. So that's just one work group that we'll be working on. We may have a work group that is a sanitation and disinfection to manage the daily and periodic disinfection logistics that would be needed. We'll develop a communications work group to develop communication strategies, inform employees of their return to work, the return to office status, and manage all pandemic-related communications. And we'll have a human resources and training work group to review and revise existing employment policies or to develop any new policies affecting employees. Then we would definitely need to have a compliance and regulations work group to ensure all guidance are appropriately applied legally in our return to office plan. We may even look at having a virus prevention work group to ensure the wellness and safety of all of our employees. This is just an example of some of the work groups that we are looking at establishing as we start producing our return to office plan. Next slide, please. So what are some of our immediate actions? Some of our immediate actions is obviously to establish the return to office response team, which we're currently working on. And then we're looking at determining the timeline and the effective date for returning employees to the office. For example, we need to decide, will our leadership and management team return before our employees return? If we do, how long will it be? If we return, then when will we require our employees to return? That's something that we need to determine. We are currently actually redesigning and reconfiguring our office space to optimize for individual workspaces used by multiple employees. So there's work that's going on in our agency to actually redesign and reconfigure our office space. Communications. We will be identifying a point of contact, such as our human resources team, to ensure we communicate effectively with employees when they express a COVID-related concern. We want to make sure that we have a single point of contact, an office who's communicating what they need to communicate, what we need to communicate to our employees. We will also be looking at whether or not we like to, actually send a survey to collect information from employees regarding their opinions and concerns on return to office in person. Not decided that we are going to send a survey out across the agency, but that is something that we will be taking into consideration. We expect employees to be hesitant about returning to in-person work, so we will be developing employee talking points to address common concerns. Such concerns may be, about the potential increase in COVID-19 cases after returning the entire workforce back into the office. There may be concerns from employees who, care for individuals who are at a higher risk for suffering from a severe illness. And concerns, for example, by employees, where they may expose, their unvaccinated children or family to COVID. So we want to make sure that we develop those talking points to address as many concerns as we can address that our employees may have. Our legal team, when we talk about compliance, that is a biggie here. Our legal team is a significant partner on the response team to ensure our plan and any policies that are developed are compliant. They will review and consider public health requirements, the federal requirements of, for example, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, Equal Employment Opportunity. We all know EEOC, the policies that EEOC are actually, generating. The CDC, they will be actually looking at all state executive orders and any other local laws before formulating a complete return to the office plan. Next slide, please. So, after ensuring compliance with laws and communicating with employees to gauge the overall attitude of the workforce regarding our return to office work, our leadership team will be assessing the business needs to determine a viable return to office plan. We would consider the traditional approach, returning all employees to in-office work, doing all work hours on the same date at the same time. Traditional. Hybrid models that we would consider. We may consider, for example, one option may be staggering weeks or days where certain employees work from home. Another hybrid model may be, transitioning certain positions or employees to working remotely permanently. We will look at a remote model, transitioning the workforce, or some of the workforce, to work remotely permanently while returning other employees to in-office work. We will also evaluate and determine as a part of our plan if a mandatory or voluntary vaccination program is appropriate for our agency. And again, we'll be reviewing and determining if our existing employment policies are to be updated to conform with the shift to a flexible workforce, if that is what we decide is best for our agency. Some of these policies may include, for example, rest period and meal break policies, policies governing the protection of confidential information, and internet security policies. That's just to name a few. Other policies may include, but not necessarily limited to, mask mandate requirements, updating any ADA and reasonable accommodation requirements for employees with physical or mental disabilities, accommodations for religious belief, and a re-exit policy in the event employees must return to a fully remote model. Next slide, please. So, some of the things that, in looking at our implementation strategies and how we actually, go about returning to the office, and some of the things that we need to do in order to implement some of these strategies. We feel that we need to announce and provide details of the return to office plan to employees, perhaps a month in advance of the effective date of reopening. This will allow employees an opportunity to do whatever they need to do that's necessary to, get in a position before returning to the office. We want to make sure and think that it is very important to provide employee with training on COVID-19 safety precautions and protocols. We want to ensure that hygiene and social distancing is addressed. We are going to continue to encourage our employees, that these tactics will be necessary during, in the workplace. We need to determine, and we'll be looking at, do we conduct temperature testing for employees to ensure that no one is coming into the workplace with a fever? We would also need to look at, if an employee is in the office and does get sick, what do we do? What is our policy? Where do they go? Do they go home immediately? Do we put them in an office so that no one else is exposed as quickly as possible? Those things we will need to determine as we, develop our plan. Enforcing our policies, we will continue to enforce policies regarding symptomatic employees, those that have been recently, diagnosed or exposed to COVID-19. So, if you're looking at, currently you have policies that, say, well, if you do get the COVID, then you have to stay home for 14 days. What are those policies? I mean, do you continue to allow employees to work from home 14 days? Do they have to take leave? Just what does those policies look like? So those are some of the things that we will continue to look at as we address our plan and look at our plan. Next slide, please. So as Kim mentioned earlier, there is an abundance of information available to you. And I provided some links and tools to resources that I have found to be very helpful as I've been researching our return to the office plan and guidance. Please know that the guidance is changing every day. So you would definitely have to go to these sites often, I would say, to make sure that you actually are looking at some of the most recent guidance that's available to us. We know, for example, there was mask mandates being lifted. Now some are saying mask mandates are going to be reinstated. So there's things of that nature that we want to make sure that we're going back and reviewing and reviewing and re-reviewing many times in order to make sure that our policies is the most up to date with the guidance that they are offering. You see here, there's guidance on that the CDC has provided for fully vaccinated people, businesses, and employers. There's some really good information on CDC and their return to work guidance. EEOC actually has good information on what you should know about COVID and the laws that pertains to ADA and reasonable accommodations and those types of laws. And then the OSHA, protected workers and how to prevent the spread of COVID in the workplace. That is really good guidance that is out there for you. And I believe Shelley is going to put that information in the chat. Shelley, I'm not sure, but I'm thinking that she's going to put it in the chat so that you have the links to get to that information as well. So that is what I have to offer you all today. And I guess, Kim, I'll turn it back over to you for any questions or comments. I'll shoot it back to Kim, I think.
Okay, that sounds great. So Shelley is putting those in chat as we speak. So feel free to grab those and save them, to go back to them, as Sharon mentioned in her talk. So as we move on into the question and answer portion of today's webinar, I would like to highlight that the session is not a political conversation, and we respectfully ask that our participants refrain from questions that are in a political nature. Our intent today is to engage in a conversation that is informative and provides valuable insight into moving beyond the pandemic and to shaping effective, sustainable policies for a hybrid workplace, and that can be informative for all attendees. So also, as we continue, feel free to share your camera, unmute, and raise your hand if you would like to ask a question. You can also put your question in chat. We will check those as well. So let's see. Questions. Amanda?
Yeah, I have a question. Yeah. How do you create buy-in among leadership who are concerned that a select few employees might not do their work, and then convince leadership to still allow flexibility for employees that they trust?
I think that's a really good question, Amanda. I think what we do, we've been, our employees have been working from home since March of 2020, I believe. And what we have found in our agency is that employees have worked very well from home. And so I think, our leadership team, we want to trust our employees to know that they are going to do what they're required to do. And of course, obviously, if we have those who, are not doing what they're, supposed to be doing, then as we look at our policy, those are some of the decisions that we are going to have to make, between, the employees who work really well from home. And, maybe if we do have to continue to allow our employees to work from home, there may be those who are working from home, and as management and leadership decide, if there are signs that some are not working very well from home, then, those decisions will be made as well, that, maybe they need more structure in the office and return to the office as opposed to, being able to work from home. So I think we're going to look at it on a, case by case. Management leadership will be making those determinations and decisions on, those employees.
Thank you.
So let's see. I have one question. What are some of the budgetary or human resources needs that just kind of sneak up on an organization when they're trying to develop a policy like this?
One of the most recent things that I've heard, that there's a lot of discussion on in developing these types of policies are you really have to be careful when employees are working from home if they have that opportunity and flexibility to work, for example, in another state. So when you have employees, they may be working in, we're in North Carolina, but someone may decide, well, I'm going to go and work in Virginia or, because you're working remotely. And there are budgetary concerns that, there are tax concerns, budgetary concerns, all kinds of legal issues that may be a issue for employees working from home.
Okay.
Oh, Kim, I'm going to put you on a quick mute because my system is telling me that my battery is running low. So I need to determine what's going on here. So I'm gonna put you guys on mute really quickly.
Okay.
Not sure what's going on with my system.
While she's handling that, I will take the time to remind everybody to feel free to either raise your hand or just put your questions in the chat, and we'll check them out. And we have also created we're updating our website with more resources. So if you go to GoTriangle.org/hybrid, you can find some of the resources that we've been working on to kind of help organizations get through this process.
Oh, Sharon, you're muted.
And here's a question.
I think I have it, Kim.
Okay, here's a question that we got. Rod Truesdale asked, he would like to hear what others are doing regarding their in-office policy. Let's see. I'm not quite sure. Rod, do you mind?
Yeah, I'm looking for volunteers, maybe in the studio audience.
Thank you.
who might
Thank you so much.
who might be willing to share what they're doing. I put what we're kind of still in a holding pattern. I put that in the chat there. We're kind of still waiting for our guidance to come down from our headquarters and just the federal government guidance in general. So we're still pretty much doing what we've been doing since March, with a few people coming in, but mostly, everybody teleworking. But if anybody has something else that they've been doing, I'd be interested to hear if there's been some hybrid kind of office sharing things kind of being considered or being done. Yeah, just kind of looking for what you guys are doing there elsewhere.
Okay. Anybody want to share what their organization is up to?
Well, we can start at GoTriangle. We're still working remotely. So yeah. So that's where we are at this point.
Has anybody else actually done a full or partial return to the office in the crowd?
Hi there, this is Hannah Reynolds from the city of Durham. So I recently started in this position, so I can't really speak to everything, but I know that the city right now is in the works of creating a hybrid working policy. They are really supportive of doing telework and flexible hours. So all of that is in the document stage right now of review. And so I believe they're predicting it to probably roll out in the next several months. It has been a long process from what I hear. And they also, this past week, they're allowing the department heads to kind of decide who is coming back. But this past week, I think they started bringing some of the staff from HR, but that's the only department I've heard of so far. And they're just coming back a couple days, but now with the new variant, you know, things are definitely changing. So that's kind of some updates that I know of so far.
Okay.
Hello, this is John from Wake Tech, and we have returned to work as of July 1. So we have 100% of our staff back on campus. And as far as our faculty, it's still split because we have a fair share of students and classes that are continuing to be remote and or online, I should say. So those faculty are to some degree remaining in that capacity. But at this point, we're planning at the fall semester to go ahead and have a full return. But of course, that is contingent upon what may be rolling out in the upcoming weeks as we see what happens here across the state.
And this is Amanda. I am actually at a university as well, UNC Chapel Hill, and we have kind of a hybrid policy that is coming up. I'm going to put a link in the chat for everyone to see to stay focused on this page. At some point, they should announce all of the arrangements that have been made, but my understanding is that there was a pilot program where various departments could apply to be able to work from home for their department. My department actually decided to have us all back in the office, so we are full staff here in the transportation and parking department, but otherwise across the university there are very schedule changes and allowance for working from home. So it really just depends on your department, but I think it's working out really well and really helping with our transportation needs at UNC. So it's allowing more flexibility on the buses, and with as many people coming into a university, that is definitely needed to allow more social distancing on the buses. So I'm really glad that UNC was able to offer that. So stay tuned to that website and hopefully they will have that posted soon.
Amanda, this is Autumn Stafford at Bob Barker Company. I'm curious, as UNC rolled out that new policy, did employees get to weigh in per department, or was it just department heads who made the decision? How did that go?
They had a lot of town halls and allowing employees to weigh in and collect feedback. It was very impressive how they organized everything, but I think overall the direction came from your individual department as to whether or not you would be allowed to work from home. I don't believe they took away, like anybody who had been working from home prior to the pandemic, I believe they were still able to do that. And unfortunately, our HR representative that was on half of this webinar had to leave for the second half. But they, I think, have done a really good job at identifying who is able to work from home. And I did work from home for a good portion of the pandemic, so I just came back July 19th. So they are starting to roll everything back into in-person because students are coming back in full across the entire UNC system, not just Chapel Hill.
Great, thank you. Our company is doing a hybrid model. We have some people who are essential workers and have been on site permanently the whole year. Our office workers are transitioning back. So we started back at 1 day a week. We're now at 2 days, and then we'll be moving to 3 days a week in September, if, depending on what happens with the cases. We have just re-implemented a full mask policy though.
Yes, and masks are required indoors at UNC as well. And if you guys want to check out the chat, there is another UNC employee who put information in the chat.
So this is Sharon. Did you all actually do a survey as well of your employees?
Yeah, we did. We sent out a survey to get people's feedback. We found that the grand majority wanted to come back no more than 2 days a week. People are
Mhm.
really still leaning towards wanting to work from home. They're doing well with it. We
Mhm.
are transitioning them back on a more flexible basis. So instead of just saying 3 days a week in the office, we're saying 24 hours a week. So those who have become accustomed to getting their kids off the bus can flex their schedule and just be in the office any 24 hours a week that works for them. Before the pandemic, we were already working from home Fridays. So that made our transition really easy and smooth, and pretty much we won't be expecting office workers to come in Fridays.
Mhm. That's really good to hear. Because those are some of the things that, we'll have to take into consideration as well. And one of the things that is I've been talking to, employees across GoTriangle, and, when it comes up as far as a survey, one of the things that is being shared with me from one of our teams is that, if you all are going to take the information that we provide and really consider the information that we're providing seriously, then that would be great. But if you're not going to consider it, then the employees didn't want to be surveyed. So, I think that is very important. If you roll out a survey, then you need, I think we have an obligation to take that information and actually listen to what the employees are saying.
That's really great feedback.
Yeah, and that sounds like that's what you all have done there. So that's really good to know.
Yeah.
This is John again from Wake Tech. I meant to add, we did roll out a telework policy, and it was posted for feedback from our HR department for all employees to review and provide feedback. It is a pilot program that we're running through. And currently, like for the summer semester, we are on a compressed work week, so we're doing 4/10s. But the pilot program allows employees to work up to 2 days off-site and the remainder to be on-site.
And this is Rod again, the EPA. You guys were mentioning surveys and such. I thought I'd pass along. We also did a survey that was kind of two-pronged. They did an online survey that everybody in EPA had access to. And then within our office in RTP, each of our little divisions, there's about like 5 or 6 divisions within that group there. We all had listening sessions where we could post, everybody could either post online or say on mic or whatever their concerns, and those were all accumulated and sent up the line to headquarters, along with all the other groups in the other offices did the same basic thing. So they accumulated all those points and sent them up, and then once the survey was closed, they sent out the results to everybody, which was really interesting. And I think about ballpark out of about 14,000 employees nationwide, I think about close to 11,000 completed the survey, which is pretty good return. It's better than most surveys. So everybody's obviously pretty concerned still.
Awesome. I have a question about proof of vaccination. So if an organization does proof of vaccination, what is the process, or what would be the options for making sure that that medical information is kept safe? Is that a consideration? Because I know that you said that you were considering doing, requiring vaccine, but going back and forth on it.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question, Kim. And the legal guidance that we have received is that, you can require employees to show proof of vaccination. Mm-hmm. The legal, what our legal team has indicated is that you don't want to collect that information. So in other words, if people show their proof of vaccination, then you don't want to violate, obviously, any HIPAA laws. So you wouldn't want to necessarily collect that information, make copies of that card, but rather than, doing that to perhaps write down employee's name and just put check. Yes, they've had it, check. No, they haven't had it. Even in doing that, you're still required to keep that information in a safe location and confidential for a number of years. And for some reason, I think if I'm not mistaken, I thought I heard it was like 30 years. And I was like, wow, that's a mighty long time to keep information on hand. But obviously you want, you just don't want to put your organization in jeopardy of collecting and making copies of that vaccination, record and document and being responsible for that. So they are saying, the easiest thing to do if you're going to do anything is just to write the employees' names, check a yes, check a no, and just keep that information on file, confidential.
Cool. I have a really good question from Bonnie Parker. She said, for those that have any number of employees in the office and some still remote, how are meetings conducted? If some people are in a conference room and some are virtual, how does that work? Is the collaborative dynamic okay? And do folks on the phone computer engage less or get ignored more? Yeah, I guess she's wondering how the hybrid model would work for what would traditionally be an in-person meeting or a meeting like this.
And unfortunately, we haven't experienced that yet, but I do think that we are getting ready to with our board meeting coming up in August. So we are testing things to see how our technology is going to work and how it'll work in person, in the conference room, board being in the conference room in person, and then perhaps individuals on the actual conference calls. So since I do know Bonnie Parker over at Campo, I will reach out to her and let her know how it goes on our end as we approach our meeting in August. Others can share some information, because that is one of the, again, another hot topic that we need to consider, that technology and how that works when, I would love to hear what others can share with that on that.
I had a question. Sharon, you talked about the work groups that are being developed, and you named a couple of different ones. Can you share a little bit more about how those are being developed, the level of staff that's involved, and how you identified which ones you thought were needed? Yes,
Shelley. Well, and what I shared, it is not set in stone yet, because we're still actually looking at it at our, at the executive leadership team level. So what I have actually asked of the team, our executive leaders are, is to identify employees to serve in these capacities. We'll need to iron out, our actual work groups once we really, set out to look at the work groups. Those were some ideas and some suggestions that I had found. But what I have asked, one of the things that we want to ensure is that, across the agency, that we're well represented in all, areas of the organization. So we want our work group to be inclusive. We're looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we want a very inclusive, work groups to, actually, help build the policy, because oftentimes the employees, they speak to one another, they talk to one another, they know, the things that they're saying. So we need that diverse group of individuals, sometimes that we don't have at the table, to give insight of, to help develop a well-rounded policy. So we would be looking for those individuals on, across the agency. The leadership team, they know their employees. They're providing the actual, names of individuals who would serve on the team. And then based on that, we would actually start looking at, who's going to serve on which work group. If we get, representation from, for example, our communications and, that communications team, then, your team, Shelley, then, you all may want to take on the piece of developing the communication strategy, as a part of the plan. Our human resources department, they may identify individuals who actually can get the training done and get the, human resources policies reviewed and that sort of thing. So, we just want a very inclusive group of our employees to show that we are actually being very transparent and inclusive.
So this question came in, and they would like to know how is GoTriangle looking to determine which office workers will actually be required to come in and which will not? Is it based on job duties and responsibilities, or is it based on some other metric?
Yeah, at this point, we will need to develop that piece of how we're looking at it. But one of the things that we will be doing is assessing our business needs. I think it comes down to the business needs of each area in the organization. For example, we've already had employees back in the office working over at our bus operations area because the business is there for them to, they needed to continue to work. And so some have been in the office. And so, it'll be based on the business needs and the determination of, who was viable for employees to return to the office. So, which is why I said earlier, it is a very complex, situation, because what we really don't want to do, obviously, is to have different treatment for different employees. We want to make sure that we're fair and that we look at and we do a complete assessment of the actual business needs of the agency. What business needs and who do we need to be in the office? We already know we have employees, who are out in the field, who are working out in the field. They're working remotely, but they've been out in the field the entire time. So they may not be ones who return to the office. So it's just going to boil down to leadership really looking at those business needs of our agency.
Okay. So let's see. Any other questions? Let's see, let me look at chat.
Bonnie, I have not done a hybrid meeting either, but beginning mid-August, when these students come back, we are going to test that out with a presentation to students about their bus options. And we're going to have part of it on Zoom and part of it being in a room for people to watch. I don't know how exactly this is going to work, but I can follow up and let you know how that goes. So it's definitely interesting because I've been full virtual for so long. I'll have to see how this looks coming back as a hybrid.
Kim, I did see one other question earlier, which was, are there ways to accommodate while treating individuals fairly, those who perhaps don't have a good work from home environment on the days that maybe they're not coming into the office?
Shelley, I'm not sure that I understood the question.
Let me see if I can find it again. What are creative ways that can be granted to physicians that are limited in their ability to work from home? So whether or not that's a technology limitation, or maybe they have children at home. I think the schools are planning to go back this fall, but that's the plan right now. And it definitely wasn't what was happening, earlier in the previous school year.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I'm not sure that I know that I can answer that 100%. But, I think that's going to be tough, because one of the, things that, as I've been researching and sitting on webinars with attorneys and all these folks, well, I guess what's going to really be interested is how, managers and supervisors have actually captured those employees who have not worked well from home. And I think, we'll have to look at on a case-by-case basis if they haven't been working well from home, but that I think that it is, really up to management to determine, the reasons why not. And it could be, like you say, children that, sometimes, I have fur babies in the house that are just like children that go in and out all day. I'm running back and forth all day. I'm surprised you all haven't heard of this afternoon. But, but I don't know. It's like you almost have to determine if they haven't worked well from home, and if they haven't been, what are the reasons why? Is it the technology? Is it, the distraction from children? And if the children go back to work and we're still working at home, then will you see an improvement there? Don't know. I would love to hear from others on, if they've had employees who have not performed well, and some of the things that, maybe some of the reasons why.
So if the employee is having a problem working from home, well, and you determine that it is technology, that it is they need, better internet, or an updated computer, or more security, or something like that, is that something that is under consideration for GoTriangle to look at? Is that part of the whole, plan? Are we going to be able to meet employees where they are?
That, that is a really good question, Kim. And I will say my answer to that would be yes. I think we would have to be able to look at that as well. It's amazing, because one of the things that, for return to office, return to work, the research actually, indicates is, a number of employees, is not that they are, they may not be a technology issue. Some employees are really, mentally struggling with working from home. It had just a hard time working from home, and there are employees who want to be back in the office, and so, I think we really do have to look at it on a case-by-case basis, and look at, what are the needs of employees, and try to, as much as we can, to meet employees where they are. That is definitely a part of what we would be looking at. And that's why things get so complicated in, trying to develop these policies, because what we don't want to do is have, our employees. For me, I think the employees is the workforce. Let's just face it, but for our employees, they are the ones that, actually doing the hard work. And so we want to make sure that our employees are well thought of and well taken care of in, the things that we do and how we go about developing the policy. And it's those types of questions like you just asked, the reason why we need, different people on the team to get to some of those things, because it may be things that we miss. We don't know. I don't know it all. This is all new for us. So to have diversity and inclusion, we'll get those things, those questions will come to the forefront, and we'll, there may be those questions just like that one that we say, oh, well, we do need to make sure that that's a part of, hadn't thought about that. It's those things that we need to know.
Yeah. So it is just about time for us to wrap up. I will ask one more question, because it was a comment, but I think it is a good question. And it is about training managers to effectively manage their remote workforce. Is that also included in the policy, and figuring out, how are we going to make sure that our managers know how to manage this, their staff when they are working remotely in an effective and efficient manner?
Kim, that was not one that I had. This is a great discussion. That is not one actually that I had on, in the policy, actually. But now that you asked that, it actually makes sense to include that in the policy.
Mhm.
Certainly something that, we can consider. It goes back to what I said before. I started out saying return to work. Someone else, when one employee said to me, Sharon, that just sounds like we haven't been working. We're returning to work. We've been working, so we're returning to the office. So like that. And now that you put that on the table, we can certainly add that as a component to the training. I mean, that would be, critical. If it's not added, and if it's, even if it's not added to this particular policy, should it be added to, maybe a employment policy? So it's those things that we definitely want to get at to make sure that is included.
Awesome. Okay, so I want to thank everyone for joining us today. And thank you, Sharon, for sharing with us today. I think it was a very good webinar.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Mhm.